May my heart always be open to little birds who are the secrets of living. Whatever they sing is better than to know, and if men should not hear them, men are old. May my mind stroll about hungry and fearless and thirsty and supple, and even if it's Sunday, may I be wrong, for whenever men are right, they are not young. And may myself do nothing usefully, and love yourself so more than truly. There's never been quite such a fool who could fail, pulling all the sky over him with one smile. Anyone know who that's by? No? It's by E. Cummings. And why I chose it, hopefully will be revealed. So I want to talk tonight about gratitude. Well, to be more specific, I want to talk about gratitude, appreciation of benefits, and appreciation full stop. So 3 slants on the same theme. And I want to explore what's involved in them, and why we might struggle to experience them, and how we can cultivate them. And I think gratitude is really important. It features very fully and strongly in the life of the Buddha, and there are many instances of appreciation and gratitude in the scriptures, one well-known one of which I will be referring to in this talk. And there's a sutta, or at least one sutta, dedicated to the subject of gratitude, so it has an important place in the Buddhist tradition. It's full of people being grateful to one another, including the Buddha, being grateful to others. As I was reading a talk earlier on access to insight by Thanisaro Bhikkhu, who told me something I didn't know, which is that the Buddha distinguishes between gratitude and appreciation for things that one has been given. He says that gratitude is, at least in the scriptures, is reserved for having received benefits from people. So having received a benefit, that benefit having been given with kindness, and that person who gives the benefit having gone some way out of their way to give it. So those seem to be the 3 criteria for gratitude, which is, the word for that is katanyu. And there's an order member called Katanyuta, who some of you know, who was a member of this Sangha, whose name means gratitude. Grateful, gratitude, one or the other. Yeah. So he illustrates this with 2 stories. Well, there's one image, which is the well-known image of the raft. So the Buddha compares the Dharma to a raft, and he says, well, you've got this lovely raft, the Dharma, which has taken you across the floods to the other shore, and out of appreciation for the raft, what do? Do you sort of pick it up and carry it about with you out of appreciation, or do you just put it down or sink it or do whatever you want to do with it? And the answer is that you put it down. You don't carry it out around with you any longer than you need to. So you can appreciate the raft, but you don't have to kind of, forever kind of apply gratitude to it, sort of make it an object of reverence, as it were. But with people, there's a sort of slightly different set of criteria. And there's this short sutta called the Katanyu Sutta, which talks about 2 people for whom it is very, very difficult to repay the gratitude that we owe them. And those 2 people are, of course, our parents. Yeah. So he says some interesting stuff before he talks about the parents, which I'll come back to. But basically he says that your parents do a lot for you. They give birth to you, obviously. They raise you, they feed you, and they show you the world. Yeah? And he says, even if you were to carry them about on your shoulders for 100 years, bathing them, rubbing unguents into them, sort of looking after them in every conceivable way, you would not be able to repay the debt you owe your parents. Yeah? Because they do so much for you. And he goes on to say that it's a lot more than that. Yeah? If you really want to repay the debts that you owe your parents, then what you have to do is you settle and establish them in conviction. You settle and establish them in virtue. You settle and establish them in generosity. And you settle and establish them in discernment. So in other words, what you give to the objects of your gratitude, to your parents in this case, are the tools they need to be permanently and truly happy. So gratitude is not just repaid on its own level in the Buddha's model, but you give back more than you receive. Yeah? You give back more than you receive. Yeah? And I know that it can be tricky with parents. Yeah? Not everybody has that kind of relationship with their parents. Yeah? Some people have a very difficult relationship with their parents. Yeah? So it can be problematic. But Thanissaro says, at the very least, they gave birth to you and they didn't leave you to die. And by and large, most parents do their best. Yeah? They do their best. They do try. Yeah? But I think, you can extend this in two ways. If you can extend this to any mentors or benefactors or people who have been important in your life, and I'm sure we can all think of many of those. But if you extend this, and if you take the Buddhist view of kind of infinite series of rebirths, which is a very strongly Tibetan view, you could the Buddha says himself that, all beings have at some point been your parents. So you can take that adage and then you can repay all beings with gratitude for what they have given you in past lives and what they will give you in future lives. So there's a very, very full expression of gratitude. Yeah. So it's not transactional, it's not measured, it's not a quid pro quo, it's not, okay, you gave me that and I'll give it back to you in the same measure. Yeah? And the Buddha says, interestingly, that this is what a civil person does. He uses the word civil, yeah? Which is quite interesting because it sort of implies, doesn't it, that it's civil people who go to make up the civilization. So a civilization is made up, in the Buddha's view, of people who repay the debt of gratitude to each other more and more, in full excess, as it were, by giving what they possibly can to make the other people that they're living with happy, which is possibly quite a far cry from where we are in our society. Yeah? The basis of a truly civilized society. Yeah. So, with that in mind, do we always live up to that? I know I don't. Yeah. Why do we fail in gratitude? Yeah. Okay, I suppose one reason why we fail in gratitude is because we don't recognise a benefit as a benefit. Yeah. Those of you who are parents, will know that even though you slave your heart out for your children and you do everything for them, for very many years they will simply not recognise the benefit they are given as a benefit because they take it as their due. It just feels that's what they're due, it's what they're entitled to. And I think if it's only probably many years later, I hope, that your children do actually start to realise the sort of fullness of what they owe you. And I've been through that we've all had parents ourselves, we've all been somebody's children. And I think for myself it's been a slow process since both my parents passed away to actually realise more and more fully how much I owed them and how much gratitude was the appropriate response to what they gave me. That they did their best, they really did their best, they put themselves out, based on kindness. They went out of their way to do more than the minimum to make me and my brother happy. Yeah? But we don't recognise this. We don't recognise the benefits. We feel entitled. I think entitlement is a big thing. It's a big issue for people. You somehow feel that I am simply deserving of this. Therefore, why should I appreciate it? Yeah? I suspect many people, certainly in my own worst moments, feel that everything is owed to me. My parents, my kids will love the story of when we went to stay in a hotel, and Plapanji will remember this one, up in the Lake District, and I went down to breakfast, and I went into the breakfast room, and I discovered to my mortification that there was no soya milk. So I sort of went off on one. I was going, where's the soya milk? How can they not have soya milk? And the subtext was, don't they know who I am? And it's that don't they know who I am mentality that gets in the way. And everybody laughed about it, and it sort of, I realised, well, why should I automatically expect there to be soya milk? Maybe it's just not very popular and it's a waste of their money. So things like that. Maybe we also hold the view that that we don't need people, that we're somehow self-made. You get that expression, don't you? You get that expression of the sort of the self-made person who's kind of hauled themselves up by their own bootstraps and built themselves up in life without the help of anyone else. I think just a little bit of kind of attention and sort of honest scrutiny of your life and a little bit of knowledge of the Buddhist scriptures will tell us that this isn't really a sustainable view. Of course we need people. Of course we're not self-made. We are the product of conditions, of all manner of conditions, just like every other phenomenon in the universe. But, we can adopt that view because, in our wealthy and privileged society, it can almost be as if things just happen for us automatically, quietly in the background, and we don't notice them. The things that make the world run for us, we just don't. If we don't take the trouble to observe them, we can almost kind of fall prey to that illusion that, we're completely independent. We don't need anyone. And of course that's not true. So, what do we do if there's a gratitude deficit? And this is a note to self, as all of my talks are. Well, we need to look closely at our lives and just have a really good look at and acknowledge the people who enrich us and who have given to us and who have made our lives better and who have encouraged us on the path and been important people in our lives, who have been kind to us and given to us. We need to acknowledge these people. And we need to acknowledge what they've given, and we need to rejoice in merits. I don't know, many of us, I'm sure, have had our merits rejoiced in and been involved in rejoicing in other people's merits, and sometimes it could feel a bit excruciating. It's like, oh no, I don't deserve it. But actually, rejoicing in merits is one of the most sort of positive, emotionally positive and spiritually positive things that you can possibly do. So it always surprises me that we do it as rarely as we do. I think we need to kind of rejoice in merits more frequently. Maybe we need to rejoice in merits every day. Maybe we need to write something down about the things that we have benefited and the people who have given us those benefits and rejoice. I know it's not something I do because I take things for granted. I have a particular view that I'm entitled to all of the things I've talked about. But those are some things that we can do, I think, to actually foster this sense of gratitude to people directly. So I want to move on from gratitude in that sense that the Buddha used to appreciation of benefits more broadly. And I think this can be benefits that we've received, but not sort of, they haven't been given to us personally by individuals, that are sort of more impersonal and perhaps even more transactional. So when the Buddha had become awakened under the Bodhi tree and emerged from his experience of awakening, the scriptures say that he went and stood at a certain point, a vantage point, some way away from the tree, the Bodhi tree, and stared at it with unblinking appreciation for 7 days. And if you go to the Mahabodhi temple at Bodh Gaya in India, you can see there are actual sort of memorial stones and plaques that show where the different things happened. So there is a sort of marked space where the Buddha went and stood and gazed upon the Bodhi tree for 7 days. So why did he do that? You would think he would have had the sense that he had plenty to do. He had to go and teach the Dharma and liberate sentient beings from suffering. But instead he spent a week just gazing at the Bodhi tree. And I like to think that he did this out of a sense of appreciation. Well, I'm assuming he did. I don't know why he would have done it otherwise. Yeah. So the tree wasn't particularly bothered. I don't think the tree was involved in an act of kindness. It didn't sort of recognise what it was doing. It was just being a tree. But the Buddha recognised that he was dependent, or he had been dependent on it. He recognised that without the tree's shelter, without its spreading branches, he wouldn't have been able to sit in the full sun of the hot season and become awakened. It just wouldn't have been possible. Yeah? So he sort of recognised his place in the natural order of things. As a human being, he recognised his frailty, his dependency, his place in things. It's a bit of a follow-up recognition to the recognition he had when he had been doing those years of ascetic practice of self-torture to try and liberate himself, that wasn't going to work. It wasn't going to bring freedom. It was just going to kill him, because he was a dependent, contingent, frail human being in the midst of a huge, vast web of conditions. Yeah? So he acknowledged the benefit that the tree gave him from this knowledge of dependence, of the importance of the conditions that it had provided him. Yeah? He didn't feel separate from it. He wasn't separate from those conditions. He wasn't setting himself apart, which is something I think that we do, again. Because I think, again, this is one of the areas for us that we sort of fail to recognise our dependency on the natural world. For instance, as we live in a sort of packaged and well-regulated and sanitised society, yeah, where your food comes from the supermarket and it's always there, well, mostly, not always, but usually there. Yeah, everything's on hand. You don't have to work to get water comes out of the tap. You know, your effluent is neatly and tidily carried away from your house. All of these things. Yeah, we just and it can give rise to this sort of complacency that these things will just automatically happen, that they are the order of things. And we know that not to be the case, and it could easily not be the case. It's certainly not been the case in the past. Yeah. So we sort of feel, again, we feel entitled, or we can feel entitled, that this is just our due, that the world owes us these things. But I remember sitting in meditation, sort of doing the mindfulness of breathing once, and it occurred to me that I kind of take the air for granted. You know, the air that I breathe is just something you just take for granted, but it's the air that I breathe is the product of the workings of billions and billions of living organisms. You know, it's what they breathe out, and they're not doing it out of love for me or out of kindness. They just do it because that's what they do. Yeah, but I benefit from it, and I am dependent upon the workings of those beings, upon their natural processes, upon the ecosystem in which they operate and move, and in which I operate and move, and I'm dependent on. Yeah. And a couple of years back, I read a remarkable novel called Barkskins. I can't remember who it was by, but it charts the story of two French families. They start off in France and they migrate to the New World in the 18th century, and they become loggers. And what they see in the New World is this infinite expanses of virgin forest, right? And it's impossible to conceive that this virgin forest would ever be exhausted. So it becomes an infinite financial resource for them forever. But of course, as the novel goes on, what happens is that the trees, they get chopped down, they disappear. The ecosystem that they are part of disappears, and then as the book comes more into modern day, you end up in that sort of sense of ecological crisis, of these trees disappearing and the systems that they are so crucial in supporting disappearing with them. And it's all the same thing. It's that sense of hubris, that sense that it's an infinite resource and we can do what we please with it and we don't have to care. Yeah. The world should meet our needs. We have that entitlement, right? So, yeah, and there's another little story. No, I'll leave that one for later. And when the world doesn't meet our needs, what is our response? Yeah? Usually our response can be a frustration and ill will, can't it? That we haven't got what we were entitled to. Yeah? And this could be kind of really prosaic things like you get stuck in a traffic jam. I was stuck in a little traffic jam earlier today because there was a van parked in the road holding up the traffic, delivery van. And of course there I was sort of huffing and chuffing a bit, you know. And then it occurred to me, well, actually, the van is delivering somebody to something. They are performing a benefit. They are bringing a benefit to somebody by being there, and there's nowhere else to park. So fair enough. And you know, why am I entitled to expect that the traffic will flow smoothly at all times? You know, other people's lives and their things get in the way. Yeah. Roadworks, or if you've ever driven on the A49, getting stuck behind a tractor. Yeah, and you think, oh God, it's another bloody tractor. And you think about it; those tractors are all part of the system which feeds us. Yeah, and if they weren't operating, then we would be in serious trouble. We wouldn't have enough to eat. We wouldn't have what we need. So again, it's appreciating that we are part of this network of conditions, yeah, which provides all of the things that we need to survive. And I just think we need to be more aware of that. We need to bring that much more into our everyday awareness. And we need to reflect on all these extraordinary things. They seem ordinary, but if they're all extraordinary, really, if you think about it. The extent, the complexity and the orderliness of the world we live in, and all of the things that people do that combine to give us comfortable and easy lives that many people in the world, of course, don't share. Yeah. So if we can recognise our own dependency and the conditionality that we are part of, then I suspect we will have less of a tendency to be impatient, to feel ill will when things don't go our way. We'll be more in a position and more willing just to appreciate and appreciate the benefits, the many myriad benefits that the world provides, that people provide and ecosystems provide, and animals and so forth. So there's an appreciation of the benefits that we receive, which perhaps in a less personal way, but there's another category of appreciation, which is perhaps the most subtle, which is the appreciation of things for their own sake. That they don't have to do anything to earn our appreciation. Right? So I think we live in a kind of consumer society and in a world where there's a very strong utilitarian view that things are there to be used, they're there to be exploited, resources are there to be exploited. Yeah? Which is a very human-centred, self-centred and appropriative view, which is based on the kind of sense of human exceptionalism. Yeah? This separation, that we are somehow separate and above the fray, above everything else. Yeah? And the inevitable, obvious result of that is exploitation, excessive consumption, environmental degradation, and so forth. Yeah. Because we see things in terms of the benefits that they bring to us, individually and as a species. So there's a little story that Bhante Sangharakshita quotes where he was in India with a Nepalese friend, and they see a magnificent fir tree, and Bhante can't help but exclaim, "What a magnificent tree." To which his Nepali friend said, "Yes, there's enough firewood in that for the entire winter." Yeah, and that's not a judgment, because in all likelihood that was what those families needed to keep themselves warm. But it's that kind of attitude, isn't it, that the things that in the world which are of beauty, you know, and have their own significance and their own meaning and life, are kind of taken and used and appropriated by us for our own ends. You get this sort of idea of ecosystem services. Yeah, I think it's an environmental science term. So that's the sum total of all of the benefits that the ecosystems give us as human beings. So it's that whole language which I sort of tend to feel is a bit part of the problem, really. Yeah. So there's this sense of taking, exploiting, more, right? And on the personal level, this is of course reflected in our tendency to crave. So what we have now in this moment isn't enough. Yeah? And so, the whole idea that we should be bored ever is an outrage, because we're entitled never to be bored. Yeah? So we're driven by this urge to for personal benefit, personal gain, to get more and more of things. So craving, of course, is all about me. So it's kind of like the expression, the personal expression of this big kind of sense in which things are just there for us to use for our own benefits. And there's another little poem here by David White, which I just want to throw in at this point, and it's called Enough. Enough. These few words are enough. If not these words, this breath. If not this breath, this sitting here. This opening to life we have refused again and again until now. Until now. Yeah. So there's that wonderful sense of just opening to life in a way that we have had the opportunity to do but have refused, because we're stuck in this sort of sense that it's not enough. Yeah. It needs to be more, it needs to be better, it needs to be brighter, more expensive, more efficient. Say what you will. So that's the sort of problem on the personal level that reflects the bigger problem. But there is a way that we can approach this differently. So we can cultivate a quality which in the Buddhist terminology is known as vidya. Yeah? So vidya is often translated as wisdom, but Sangharakshita renders it as something like aesthetic appreciation. So it's the ability just to appreciate things on their own terms, for their own qualities, their own specialness, their own beauty. Yeah? So we can learn to do this. Yeah? And one of the reasons I love the Cummings poem is because it talks about birds. So if I find myself in this sort of slightly wretched state of just not happy in the moment, my mind looking for things outside itself, looking for more and more and more, I hear birdsong. And more often than not, that brings me back, to the moment. And this birdsong, the bird isn't singing for me, it's not an ecosystem service, it's just the bird singing because that's what birds do. Yeah? And it brings me right back into that moment, into that sense of just being with it. I can just appreciate it. I don't have to do anything with it. I don't have to record it or take a picture of it. Yeah? I can just be there with the birds singing. And there's something particular about birdsong, I find, in that. Yeah? And we can appreciate these things all the more, I suppose, because of their fragility and their transience, and the fact that we can't rely on them always being there. Yeah. And we don't need them to survive. It's a different sort of benefit. Yeah. I heard a news story about the southern koala, and so they managed to breed a southern koala in the UK for the first time, because the southern koala has been really under the cosh in Australia because of the bushfires and so forth. And I was looking at this southern koala and I was thinking, I don't need this koala to live, but it's just delightful. It is just delightful in and of itself. It doesn't need to justify its existence. And if you think about it, I think you can expand that to all things. The things of this world, the beauties of this world, they don't need to justify their existence. They don't need to be useful to us. They can just be in their own particular splendour and glory. Yeah. And I think if we stop and just appreciate them, then they will reveal themselves more in their full beauty. If we stop wanting them to deliver for us. Yeah. So this sense of wisdom, this vidya, this aesthetic appreciation arises if we can just manage to stop seeing everything through this sort of lens of self-reference Stop making it about me and just start seeing these things for themselves. Okay, and in order to do this, well, I think we need to slow down, yeah, and pay close attention. I was walking along the river this afternoon trying to follow my own advice. Came across a wild rose bush with just the tiniest suggestion of little red buds. Yeah, thinking this bush is just doing its own thing, fulfilling its own nature without any reference to me. I don't want anything, I can't derive any benefit from it. It's not there to serve me, it is just there being itself, expressing itself in its rosebushness, and I can just participate in that and just enjoy it. And there are so many ways in which we can appreciate so many things by adopting that attitude. And again, this takes me back to the Buddha standing there for 7 days looking at the tree. As well as being appreciative of the tree, perhaps he was just simply enjoying it. Yeah? It had done its job. He didn't need it. He didn't need it to do anything for him. He was just completely aware of the tree and its full treeness, without any sense of appropriation or making it his or needing it to be or do anything. Yeah? And I can't imagine what that would have been like. I don't think I could have stood and watched a rose bush for 7 days. But you never know.
It might have been a visceral feeling with the tree.
Sorry?
It might not just have been a visual expressed with the tree. It could have been a from the heart. Visceral.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Different.
Yeah. Yeah. It could have been. So the Buddha was never in a hurry. This is one of the things that you get from the Buddha's scriptures, that you couldn't hurry the Buddha. Yeah. If he was set on his arms round or going round, he wouldn't be hurried, he wouldn't be rushed into doing things. Maybe that was an expression of his aesthetic appreciation. And that aesthetic appreciation, I think, expresses itself in the sort of the image of the lotuses. So after he's been enlightened and he's been umming and ahhing about whether he can possibly teach and explain or even get across what he's experienced, he is urged to teach, and then he has this vision of all beings being like a lake of lotuses, and they're all open, but some of them are like under the water, and some of them are just resting on the water, and some of them are right up out of the water, but they're all individual and they're all beautiful. They're all lotuses, they're all flowering. And you get a sense of how he saw people like that, and he really did. He would, where we might see disagreeable things and ugliness and I don't know, problems, the Buddha would see potential and beauty and light and life. And that is, I suppose, what the enlightened consciousness sees when it sees the world, when it sees things, when it sees a rosebush. Yeah, so we need to slow down and pay attention to really be able to appreciate things in and for themselves. So I've come to the end, really. So I talked about gratitude for people and how we can try and repay that gratitude by giving people the things they need to be happy, by overpaying it, as it were. I talked about benefits that we receive and how we can get out of that sense, or try and get out of that sense of entitlement, to really appreciate the benefits we have as benefits. And that might stop us reacting with ill will and frustration when things don't go our way. And how we can slow down and really appreciate the sort of minutiae of life, the beauty that things present when they are just being themselves. And I'm going to finish by rereading that E. Cummings poem because I think it's so lovely, so indulge me. May my heart always be open to little birds who are the secrets of living. Whatever they sing is better than to know, and if men should not hear them, men are old. May my mind stroll about hungry and fearless, and thirsty and supple, and even if it's Sunday, may I be wrong. For whenever men are right, they are not young. And may myself do nothing usefully, and love yourself so more than truly. There's never been quite such a fool who could fail pulling all the sky over him with one smile.